Hej och välkomna till Ntd Nyheter. Jag heter Cecilia Samuelsson. Här är våra rubriker. Amerikanska folkhälsomyndigheten CDC utarbetade myokarditvarning för covid-19-vaccinet 2021. Forskare från Wuhan besökte Faucis myndighet under 2017 enligt e-postmeddelanden. Den kinesiska regimen kritiseras i FN för bristande respekt för mänskliga rättigheter. 190 FN-anställda i Gaza är misstänkta terrorister enligt israelisk underrättelserapport. Och specialserie visar revolution på export till Asien. USAs nationella folkhälsomyndighet CDC planerade vid ett tillfälle att skicka ut en varning om covid-19-vacciner, men valde i slutändan att inte göra det. Ett dokument som erhållits av Epoch Times visar att varningen handlade om hjärtinflammation och var avsedd för statliga och lokala tjänstemän.
USAs nationella folkhälsomyndighet CDC skickar varningar till federala, statliga och lokala folkhälsomyndigheter och läkare över hela USA via ett system som kallas Health Alert Network. Myndigheten säger att meddelanden via systemet förmedlar viktig hälsoinformation. Enligt det nya erhållna dokumentet hade tjänstemän hos CDC skrivit en varning angående myokardit och de två mest använda covid-19-vaccinen den 21 maj 2021. Det var 3 dagar innan CDCs arbetsgrupp erkände att antalet rapporterade myokarditfall efter vaccination var högre än förväntat. Och en vecka tidigare sa CDC att de fortfarande rekommenderade att praktiskt taget alla amerikaner från 12 år och uppåt skulle ta vaccinet.
Nyligen släppta e-postmeddelanden kastar mer ljus över förhållandet mellan Anthony Fauci och Wuhans virologiska institut i Kina. E-postmeddelandena visar att forskare som arbetade vid Wuhan-laboratoriet besökte Faucis myndighet vid National Institutes of Health, NIH, under 2017.
Detta skedde bara några månader innan den amerikanska myndigheten NIH upphävde ett stopp för virologisk högriskforskning. E-postmeddelandena släpptes efter att den ideella forskargruppen US Right to Know stämt NIH med stöd från Freedom of Information Act. E-postmeddelandena visar att Shi-Jung Lee, som är seniorforskare vid Wuhans virologiska institut, besökte National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases i juni 2017. Xi forskar på SARS-liknande coronavirus som kommer från fladdermöss och leder Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases vid Wuhan-laboratoriet. Det är första gången han svarar på frågor under ed sedan november 2022. Samtidigt framträdde Fauci inför kongressen den 8 och 9 januari för att svara på frågor. Frågorna tog bland annat upp hans ändrade inställning till munskydd, hur den myndighet han ledde finansierade riskfylld forskning i Kina och hur han tonade ner immuniteten efter en infektion. Utfrågningen av Fauci från House Committee on the Coronavirus Pandemic skedde bakom stängda dörrar. Det var första gången han svarade på frågor under ed sedan november 2022. Fauci gick med på att framträda och svara på frågor om han fick ta med sig 2 personliga advokater och 2 regeringsadvokater.
En grupp diplomater säger att den kinesiska regimen har lobbat andra länder för att de ska berömma landets mänskliga rättigheter. Avslöjandena kom inför ett viktigt FN-möte där Kina ställdes inför frågor och kritik för sina åtgärder i Hongkong och i Xinjiang.
Enligt diplomaterna hade Kinas beskickning vid FN i Genève skickat promemorior till sändebud från andra länder. Det kinesiska sändebudet ska ha riktat in sig på icke-västliga länder. En afrikansk diplomat som talade med Reuters under förutsättning att han fick vara anonym bekräftade att han hade fått en förfrågan och sa att han skulle göra som han blivit ombedd. Kina var i hetluften när FNs råd för mänskliga rättigheter höll sin allmänna periodiska översyn som alla medlemsländer måste genomgå vart 5:e år.
Mer än 160 länder registrerade sig för att delta i diskussionen i Genève om Kinas historik gällande mänskliga rättigheter. Vilka argument framförde de? Här kommer slutsatserna.
Den kinesiska regimen utsattes i FN för en sällsynt granskning av hur de följt de mänskliga rättigheterna. FNs granskning är den första sedan en FN-rapport från 2022 slog fast att frihetsberövandet av uigurer och andra minoriteter i Xinjiang i nordvästra Kina kan utgöra brott mot mänskligheten. Storbritanniens ständiga representant utfärdade rekommendationer bland annat om att stoppa förföljelsen och fängslandet av uigurer och tibetaner, tillåta religions- och trosfrihet samt upphäva den nationella säkerhetslag som Peking har infört i Hongkong. Ett ovanligt högt antal, över 160 länder, vissa kritiska till Peking, andra allierade, registrerade sig för att delta. Det innebar att varje land hade högst 45 sekunder på sig att tala. Här är den kanadensiska ambassadören.
Canada recommends that China, 1, implement the recommendations set out by the CSCR and CEDAW, end all coercive measures imposed on Uyghurs, Tibetans and other ethnic minorities, including forced labor, coercive labor transfers, forced sterilizations, and mandatory residential schools. 2, ensure Hong Kong upholds its obligations under the ICCPR. 3, repeal the current national security law in Hong Kong and discontinue all cases against individuals charged for exercising their human rights and freedoms. 4, end all forms of enforced disappearances targeting human rights defenders, ethnic minorities and Falun Gong practitioners, and 5, grant the UN, including the OHCHR and special procedures, full and unfettered access to all regions of China, including Tibet and Xinjiang. Canada also notes with concern the increasing extraterritorial repression of human rights defenders, and we wish China's delegation a successful UPR.
För vissa ambassadörer blev det en övning i snabbläsning för att hinna med alla sina punkter.
We wish to recommend that China first end the criminalization of religious and peaceful civil expression by ethnic and ethno-religious groups, including Muslim Uyghurs and Buddhist Tibetans and Mongolians, under the pretext of protecting state security. Second, repeal Hong Kong's national security law, ignoring fundamental rights and freedoms, and end intimidation and attacks on human rights lawyers and journalists. Third, stop cross-border kidnappings and intimidating Chinese citizens living abroad.
Peking förnekade alla brott mot de mänskliga rättigheterna. Zheng Shu, Kinas ständiga representant vid FN, sa att kinesiska medborgares religionsfrihet skyddas. Washingtons sändebud upprepade det amerikanska anklagelsen att den kinesiska regimen begår folkmord.
Har FN-organet på Gazaremsan infiltrerats av terrorister? En israelisk underrättelserapport innehåller några häpnadsväckande siffror. Nu har flera länder, inklusive Sverige, avbrutit sin finansiering av detta FN-organ som tillhandahåller humanitärt bistånd till Gazaremsan. I en video från IDF är vissa Gazainvånare redo att leva utan Hamas.
Den 29 januari offentliggjorde Israel en underrättelserapport som har satt FNs hjälporganisation för palestinaflyktingar, UNRWA, i strålkastarljuset. Detta FN-organ tillhandahåller utbildning, hälsovård och andra sociala tjänster för det palestinska folket på Gazaremsan. Och det finansieras nästan helt och hållet av FNs medlemsstater. I Israels senaste underrättelserapport hävdas att nästan 200 av UNRWAs egen personal är misstänkta terrorister från Hamas eller islamiska jihad, och 12 av dem är till och med misstänkta för att ha deltagit i terroristattacken den 7 oktober då över 1200 oskyldiga människor dödades i Israel och över 200 personer togs som gisslan. Efter denna rapport har över 10 länder, däribland USA och Tyskland, pausat sin finansiering av UNRWA, vilket kan få en direkt påverkan på den humanitära situationen på Gazaremsan. En israelisk lagstiftare gav sin syn på situationen.
We have submitted intelligence material to those countries proving that UNRWA employees took part on the massacre of October 7th. Some of them actually entered Israel, committed the massacre, the raping, the kidnapping. Others were hiding hostages in Gaza. It is about time to dissolve UNRWA and to think about other ways to support the Palestinians.
Och han påpekade att FN redan har FNs flyktingorgan UNHCR som stöder flyktingar över hela världen.
Why do you need a special agency for the Palestinian refugees? It is about time to include the Palestinians in Gaza and Judea and Samaria as part of the UNHCR.
Samtidigt sa FN att alla som är inblandade i terrordåd kan komma att åtalas. Av de 12 UNRWA-anställda som anklagas för att ha deltagit i massakern den 7 oktober har nu 9 avskedats och 2 bekräftats döda. Under tiden säger invånarna på Gazaremsan att de inte kan leva utan UNRWA.
Our food is from UNRWA. Our water is from them. Our whole life is from them. I suffer from diabetes and high blood pressure. Where do I get my treatment? From UNRWA. Where can we get all this if the aid stops?
Och enligt en video som släpptes av Israels försvarsmakt på lördagen är vissa Gaza-invånare redo att leva utan Hamas. Dessa personer hördes ropa: "Folket vill störta Hamas."
Shenyun Performing Arts har börjat sin världsturné 2024 och i Atlanta, Georgia såg den Grammy-belönade bandmedlemmen i Commodores föreställningen och kallade den hänförande.
First of all, it was absolutely great, right? I would say it deserves a Grammy.
Shenyun uppträdde för Atlantas publik och upprätthöll sitt uppdrag att återställa 5000 år av kinesisk civilisation och kultur. Genom att kombinera klassisk kinesisk dans, musik, kostym och visuella effekter väcks berättelser till liv.
It was really written well. You know, it all meshed together. And there were always moments of ups and downs, and you know, the way it made you feel going through the whole thing was the way that I think that it should have been. I was really mesmerized by it. I loved it. I would love to have met the conductor and also the writer.
Enligt Shenyuns webbplats är det i klassisk kinesisk dans de inre känslorna som styr kroppen för att uppnå rörelsernas fulla uttryck.
Whoever wrote the music, whoever did the dancing, the choreography, it was seamless. It was very special the way they did it. And of course the dancers are just incredible.
I feel inspired. I feel lifted and fed. My whole spirit, my whole body has just really is in a state of happiness.
You think of perfection as mechanical, but the movement on the stage, everything was extremely graceful, and it communicated the heart of the religion and the spiritual beliefs of the theme of the show.
Förutom klassisk kinesisk dans ingår i Shenyun även musikaliska framträdanden. Erhun är ett tvåsträngat musikinstrument med över 4000 år lång historia och kan genom sitt ljud förmedla ett brett spektrum av känslor.
It was absolutely incredible that you could have so much emotion and sound and vibrancy in a two-stringed instrument.
It really communicated a deep felt emotion that I think what the whole cast and everyone in their performance, everyone gave that. It was really a spiritual journey.
Shenyun kommer till Sverige och uppträder i Stockholm den 27 till 30 mars och i Linköping den 31 mars till 1 april.
You got to see it. The elegance and the strength and all of the dances and the performances were, yes, I would recommend it highly.
Vi är strax tillbaka.
En föreställning som verkligen betyder något. För var och en av oss. Detta är vad du har väntat på. Köp biljetter nu på shenyun.com.
Kommunistkulten sprider sig över världen med hjälp av våld och lögner. När kommunismen exporteras från ett mäktigt land till ett svagare så är våld den snabbaste och mest effektiva vägen. Den fria världens oförmåga att se kommunismens kultartade natur leder till att man tar lätt på dess export av kommunismens ideologi. Vi kommer nu att visa del 5 i avsnittet Revolution på export i specialserien Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. Filmen är baserad på boken How the Spectre of Communism is Ruling Our World.
The communist cults spread across the world is powered by violence and deception. When communism is exported from a powerful country to a weaker one, violence is the quickest and most effective route. The failure of the free world to recognize the cultish character of communism leads it to take lightly the export of communist ideology. This chapter will focus on the expansion and infiltration of communist ideology in Asia, Africa, South America, and Eastern Europe. 1. Exporting revolution to Asia. The Soviet Union's export of revolution was the real reason the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, was able to seize power. In 1919, the Soviet Union established the Third Communist International, which aimed to export revolution around the world. In April 1920, Grigory Voitinsky, the representative of the Third Communist International, traveled to China. In May, an office was set up in Shanghai to make preparations for the formation of the CCP. Over the next 30 years, the CCP was merely an organ of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and Mao Zedong received a monthly stipend of 160 to 170 yuan from the Russians. The average monthly salary of a worker in Shanghai at that time was around 20 yuan. The CCP's seizure of power was in part connected with the Communist Party's infiltration of the United States. This is one of the reasons U.S. President Harry S. Truman cut off support to Chiang Kai-shek while the Soviets continued to support the CCP. Truman also made the decision to exit Asia after World War II. In 1948, the U.S. Army left South Korea. And on January 5, 1950, Truman announced that the United States would no longer interfere in the affairs of Asia. This included the termination of military assistance to Chiang Kai-shek's Taiwan, including in the case of a war between the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China. A week later, U.S. Secretary of State Dean Acheson reiterated Truman's policy and said that if war were to break out on the Korean Peninsula, the United States would not get involved. These anti-intervention policies provided an opportunity for the Communist Party to expand its influence in Asia.
Flared into war when communist North Korean forces invaded the Free Republic of South Korea.
When North Korea invaded the South and the United Nations sent troops, the United States changed its policy. The CCP went all out in trying to export revolution, in addition to training guerrilla fighters in different countries, providing weapons, and sending troops to fight against legitimate governments. It also provided significant financial support for insurrections. During the heat of the Great Cultural Revolution in 1973, the CCP's foreign aid spending reached its peak, 7% of the national fiscal expenditure. According to Chen Yaping, a Chinese scholar with access to secret documents released by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, quote, 10,000 tons of rice were shipped to Guinea and 15,000 tons of wheat were sent to Albania in 1960. From 1950 to the end of 1964, the total foreign aid expenditure was 10.8 billion yuan, during which time the most expenditure was from 1960 to 1964 when the Great Famine was going on in China. During the famine from 1958 to 1962, tens of millions died of hunger. Yet foreign aid expenditures totaled 2.36 billion yuan. If these expenditures had been used to purchase food, it would have saved 30 million people. All those people died because of the CCP's Great Leap Forward movement, and they were simultaneously victims of the CCP's attempts at exporting revolution. A. The Korean War. Communism seeks to conquer the world in order to destroy mankind. It exploits the human hunger for fame and fortune to mislead people into spreading its evil ideology. Stalin, Mao, Kim Il-sung, and Ho Chi Minh were driven by such desires. At a meeting with Stalin in 1949, Mao promised to send over 1 million troops and over 10 million workers to help Stalin's expansion into Europe in exchange for Mao's control over North Korea. On June 25, 1950, after extensive planning, North Korea invaded the South, and in 3 days, Seoul was taken. After a month and a half, the entire Korean peninsula was occupied by the North. Before the war broke out, in March 1950, Mao amassed a large number of troops near the Korean border to have them ready for war. The details of the war itself are beyond the scope of this chapter, but in short, the war stretched on because of Truman's policy of appeasement. The CCP sent a, quote, volunteer army to the peninsula with another secret agenda to get rid of the more than 1 million Kuomintang soldiers who had surrendered during the Civil War. By the end of the Korean War, casualties on the Chinese side were over 1 million. The outcome of the Korean War was a split peninsula. Since the CCP and the Soviet Communist Party fought for control of North Korea, the North benefited from both sides. For example, in 1966, when Kim Il-sung visited China, he discovered that a subway was under construction in Beijing. He then requested that an identical subway be constructed in Pyongyang for free. Mao immediately decided to halt the construction in Beijing and sent equipment and personnel, including 2 divisions of the PLA's Railway Corps and numerous engineers, totaling several tens of thousands of people, to Pyongyang. The North didn't spend a penny or use any of its own people in the construction, yet demanded that the CCP guarantee the safety of the subway in times of war. In the end, Pyongyang's subway system became one of the deepest in the world at the time, with an average depth of 90 meters, 295 feet, and a maximum depth of 150 meters, 492 feet underground. After the construction was completed, Kim Il-sung told the public that it had been designed and built by Koreans. Moreover, Kim often bypassed the CCP and went directly to the Soviet Union for money and material. After the Korean War, the CCP deliberately left some people in North Korea with the mission of bringing the North closer to Beijing and prying it away from Moscow. Kim either killed or jailed the CCP personnel, and the CCP ended up losing on all fronts. After the collapse of the Soviet Communist Party, the CCP decreased its aid to North Korea. In the 1990s, the North Korean people were starving. In 2007, the Non-Governmental Organization Association of North Korean Defectors reported that in the 60 years of Kim's rule, at least 3.5 million died of hunger and related diseases. This is another bloody debt of the communists' exported revolution. B. The Vietnam War. Before the Vietnam War, the CCP supported the Communist Party of Vietnam, CPV, to defeat France in 1954, resulting in the 1954 Geneva Conference and the confrontation between North and South Vietnam. Later, France retreated from Vietnam. The invasion of North Vietnam into the South and the intervention of the United States made the Vietnam War more intense. It became the largest war in a single theater after World War II. The U.S. military participated in the war from 1964 to 1973. As early as 1952, Mao sent advisory groups to the CPV. The head of the military advisory group was General Wei Guo-ching of the People's Liberation Army. The Land Reform Advisory Group, dispatched by the CCP, detained and executed tens of thousands of landlords and rich peasants in Vietnam, triggering famine and peasant riots in the north. The CCP and the CPV together suppressed these uprisings and launched rectification movements of the party and army. In order to become the leader of communism in Asia, Mao aided Vietnam on a large scale, despite the fact that tens of millions of people were starving to death in China. In 1962, Liu Shaoqi, vice chairman of the CCP, ended Mao's frenzied policy at the 7,000 People's Assembly, preparing to restore the economy to health and effectively marginalize Mao. But Mao refused to give up power, so he brazenly made China enter the Vietnam War, while Liu, who had no power base in the military, had to sideline his plans for economic recovery. In 1963, Mao dispatched Luo Ri-chin and Lin Biao to Vietnam in succession. Liu promised Ho Chi Minh that the CCP would shoulder the cost of the Vietnam War itself. He said, quote, "You can take China as your home front if there's a war." With the investigation and support of the CCP, in July 1964, the CPV attacked a U.S. warship with torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, creating the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which triggered the United States' participation in the war. Subsequently, in order to compete with the Soviet Union for influence over Vietnam, the CCP spent treasure, weapons, and blood. Historian Chen Shenhui wrote in his book The Truth of the Revolution, the 20th Century Chronicle of China, quote, "Mao's support for Vietnam brought disaster. It caused the death of 5 million civilians, led to landmines and ruin everywhere, and caused the economy to collapse. The support the CCP provided the CPV included the following: weapons, ammunition, and other military supplies sufficient to equip more than 2 million soldiers in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, more than 100 production companies and repair factories, over 300 million meters of cloth, over 30,000 cars, hundreds of kilometers of railroads, over 5 million tons of food, over 2 million tons of gasoline, over 3,000 kilometers of oil pipelines, hundreds of millions of US dollars. Apart from these goods and money supplies, the CCP also secretly dispatched over 300,000 PLA troops, who then donned North Vietnamese fatigues to fight against the South Vietnamese and US militaries. To ensure the secret was kept, numerous Chinese soldiers who died in the war were buried in Vietnam. By 1978, the CCP's total aid to Vietnam reached 20 billion, while China's GDP in 1965 was only 70.4 billion yuan, approximately 28.6 billion at the official exchange rate at the time. In 1973, the United States compromised with the domestic anti-war movement, which was actually instigated by communists, and withdrew its troops from Vietnam. On April 30, 1975, North Vietnam occupied Saigon and took South Vietnam. Under the direction of the CCP, the CPV began suppressions similar to the CCP's campaign to suppress counter-revolutionaries. More than 2 million people in South Vietnam risked death to flee the country, becoming the largest refugee wave in Asia during the Cold War. In 1976, the whole of Vietnam fell to communism.
Detta var den första delen av del 5 i vår specialserie Hur kommunismens spöke styr världen. För att se hela delen samt andra avsnitt gå till Ntd Sveriges kanaler på YouTube, Facebook och Ganjing World. Tack för att ni har tittat och på återseende.